listeners, to Gallows Gunfights, a dark dialogue series. This is episode 9 of our season-long examination of Billy the Kid and the Lincoln County War. If you're joining us for the first time, this series builds deliberately. The alliances, the grudges, the legal maneuvering, the retaliations, they all stack. And this episode sits in the middle of a 5-day siege that only makes full sense when you've walked through the road that led to it. So if you're new here, welcome. I strongly recommend starting at episode 1 and moving forward in order. This story was not chaotic, it was constructed, decision by decision, and we're following it in the same way. If you've been with us from the beginning, thank you, and you already understand what's at stake. By day 4 of the 5-day Battle of Lincoln, the gunfire is no longer surprising. The town is empty. Homes have been turned into strongholds. A man has been killed inside a fortified house, and yet, from inside those walls, the Regulators still believe that they're winning. They're not. Today we examine the last full day before federal authority steps into the street. The last day, Billy the Kid exists inside this siege as simply another rifle behind adobe walls. The last day where endurance can still masquerade as control. Before we begin, if you value long-form, historically grounded storytelling like this, take a moment to support the work. Like the episode, leave a review, share it with someone who appreciates history without the myth. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up and ring that bell so you don't miss the next installment. Now, day 4, the final day without a verdict. By the 4th day, the courtroom is empty. Not adjourned and not dismissed, just simply bypassed. What remains is chambers, where decisions are no longer announced, only reached. The record no longer needs presentation, it's already heavy. Walls have been tested, distance has killed, civilians have bled, and authority has learned, quietly, that observation does not absolve it of consequence. Day 4 does not open with a charge, it opens with movement away from town. Women walking, families leaving, homes surrendered not by force, but by endurance. By morning, Lincoln is no longer a contested place. It is a place being abandoned. Not evacuated by order, but emptied by calculation. Those who leave are not fleeing bullets alone. They're fleeing the realization that no one is coming to reclaim the street for them. That matters because when civilians seek refuge at a fort rather than protection in their homes, the jurisdiction has already failed, whether it admits it or not. Inside chambers, that fact cannot be argued away. By this point, the law understands 3 things with clarity it did not possess before. First, time is no longer neutral. Every hour favors one outcome and forecloses another. Second, waiting is no longer restrained. It's a choice with measurable victims. And third, if authority does not decide the terms of intervention, the terms will be decided for it. Day 4 is where the siege stops testing patience and starts testing responsibility. Doctors now cross fire with children in tow, not under truce, not under order, but because necessity has outrun permission. Wounds are sewn in houses that should never have been turned into targets. The act of healing becomes an act of defiance, not against gunmen, but against paralysis. Inside the McSween house, death finally arrives, not with spectacle, not with intent, but as collateral certainty. A stray round, a body moved quietly out of the way, confidence remains, but now it rests on arithmetic rather than optimism. The belief is no longer, we will win. It is, they cannot afford to wait us out. That belief will prove to be expensive. By afternoon, rumors do what bullets cannot. They travel freely, they exaggerate, they force reaction. The idea of reinforcements, whether real or not, pushes men towards authority not as arbiters but as tools. Requests are no longer abstract, they are personal, direct, urgent. And authority listens, not publicly, not officially, but in chambers where pretense gives way to preparation. Because by evening, the language changes. Intervention is no longer discussed as force, it is reframed as protection. Not to stop the siege, not to choose sides, but to preserve life, specifically the lives that can still be named without controversy. That phrasing is important. It is how institutions move without admitting failure. It is how canons are justified before they're even repaired. It is how a decision announces itself before it is acknowledged. Day 4 ends the last illusion, that there is still room for delay, that neutrality still exists, that tomorrow can arrive unchanged. When iron is being readied at the forge, the verdict has already been reached, even if no one has yet stepped back into the courtroom to say it aloud. Day 4 does not escalate the siege. It commits it. By sunrise on Thursday, July 18th, Lincoln no longer resembles a town under siege. It resembles a town that has already decided it cannot survive one. The difference matters. A siege implies endurance. An empty town implies judgment. At its fullest, Lincoln housed roughly 50 families, merchants, ranchers, laborers, children, people whose lives were structured around trade, land, and proximity. The street was not wide, but it functioned. Commerce moved through it, conversation moved through it, law, however imperfectly, still occupied it. By day 4, that structure has collapsed entirely. There has been no formal evacuation, no bell rung, no decree issued. People have simply begun to leave. They leave because windows are shattered, because rifle fire now defines daylight, because homes have become fortified positions, because the distinction between shelter and target has evaporated. Both factions have contributed to this transformation. The Murphy, Dolan, and Peppin men occupy the Wortley Hotel, the house, and several private dwellings. The Regulators hold the McSween house, the Tunstall store, and the Ellis house. Each seized building narrows the map of neutrality. A town does not survive when neutrality disappears. By the morning of day 4, only about a dozen families remain inside Lincoln. The rest have scattered. Some move west towards ranchland. Some shelter with friends. Some choose open space over walls that now attract fire. And 3 Hispanic women walk the entire distance to Fort Stanton. They arrive on foot, not escorted, not armed, not dramatic. They arrive because staying is no longer survivable. They are brought before Colonel Nathan Dudley, commander of the post. They do not request mediation. They do not ask for speeches. They ask for soldiers. Send troops into Lincoln. Restore their homes. End the fighting. The request is direct. Dudley listens. He does not question the severity of the situation. He does not dismiss their fear, and he does not suggest exaggeration. He refuses. His authority, as he interprets it, does not extend to reclaiming private property in a factional dispute. The army will not march into Lincoln to pick winners in a cattle war. He offers protection instead, not in their homes and not in Lincoln, inside the fort, and they accept. And that moment is more consequential than it appears, because when civilians must walk to federal protection, while federal authority refuses to walk back with them, neutrality stops being abstract and it becomes visible. By mid-morning, Fort Stanton shelters civilians who have fled Lincoln, and Lincoln stands nearly empty. This is not an incidental displacement. It is structural collapse. A town that loses its population while armed men remain behind has already shifted from community to battlefield, and the siege continues inside it. By the time the sun clears the hills on day 4, there's already a wound inside Lincoln that has been bleeding for nearly 12 hours. Ben Ellis did not fall in battle. He stepped into his yard. Shortly before nightfall the previous day, Ellis had walked outside to feed a mule. It was a domestic act, routine, unguarded, stripped of strategy, within the geometry of Lincoln's firing lanes. It was also exposure. A rifle report cracked from the Murphy-Dolan side. The bullet struck Ellis in the neck. He fell where he stood. The yard became contested ground in an instant. Regulators from inside the Ellis house rushed into the open, dragging him back under fire. Shots were returned, not to advance, not to punish, but to prevent the wounded man from being finished where he lay. When the door was shut behind them, the reality was immediate. The wound was grave. There was no surgeon, No trained medical authority, only cloth pressure and the knowledge that the night would be long. An attempt made by Dr. Taylor Ely failed the night before, so Ellis bled through the night. Pressure slowed the loss, hope substituted for skill. Men who understood firearms far better than anatomy did what they could. So by morning, he was still alive, but barely, and daylight changes calculations. Early on Thursday morning, Dr. Taylor Ely leaves the Tunstall store and he steps openly into Lincoln's main street. He does not move cautiously. He does not hug walls. He does not send a scout ahead. With him are his wife and 2 young daughters, Pearl, 5 years old, and Ruth, still an infant. There is no escort, no white flag, no negotiated truth. They walk. They pass boarded windows and shattered glass. They cross a street that has absorbed days of rifle fire. Men on both sides see them. No one fires. This restraint does not come from law. It does not come from orders. It comes from recognition. A doctor, a woman, 2 children. The moment draws a line everyone understands without having to articulate it. Inside the Ellis house, Ellis lies pale and weakened. He has lost a lot of blood. He has lost a lot of time. What he has not yet lost is viability. Ely examines the wound. It is severe, it is dangerous, but it is also survivable if it's treated. He cleans it, he stitches it closed, he stabilizes what the night threatened to end. There is no recorded speech, no dramatic declaration, just competence finally allowed to function. The act is small in scale compared to the siege around it, but its implications are not. For the first time since the fighting began, a civilian injury receives professional care rather than improvisation. And then Ely does something equally important and brave. He leaves. He walks back down the same street with his wife, with his daughters, and again, no shot is fired. For a narrow span of the morning, Lincoln proves that there is still a line. It is thin, it is fragile, and it exists only because individuals decide not to cross it. But it does hold. The siege does not end. Positions do not shift. Authority does not intervene. But a man who might have died in darkness survives because daylight exposed what night concealed. By midday, the guns will resume. By evening, the calculus will change again. But for this moment, the town demonstrates something uncomfortable. Protection is already happening. It just is not coming from institutions. By midday on day 4, the siege has settled into a pattern. From the outside, Lincoln appears fractured, houses seized, streets emptied, rifle fire dictating movement. But inside the McSween house, the fighting has taken on a different character. It is no longer chaos, it is routine. The McSween house holds roughly a dozen armed regulators. With them are civilians. Alexander McSween, his wife Susan, their niece Elizabeth Shield, and her 5 children, along with law student Harvey Morris. This is not a military headquarters. It is a fortified home containing both fighters and families. The armed men include Jim French, Jose Chavez y Chavez, Tom O'Falliard, Ignacio Gonzalez, George Bowers, Joe Smith, Jose Maria Sanchez, Vicente Romero, Florencio Chavez, Francisco Zamora, and 15-year-old Inigo Salazar. And of course, Billy the Kid. On day 4, Billy is not moving across town. He's not leading charges. He is not breaking sieges. He is inside. He rotates through firing positions like the others. He watches angles. He fires when targets are present. He reloads. He waits. There are no recorded speeches, no dramatic declarations, no evidence that he is issuing commands. Nominal command still rests with Alexander McSween. Decisions defer upward. The structure of authority inside the house remains intact. Billy is just one rifle among many. That's important because later memory will compress him into motion, appearing every time danger peaks, vanishing when it subsides. Day 4 offers no such version. The work inside the house is procedural. Windows are reinforced, loopholes are used deliberately, ammunition is conserved, watches are rotated, exposure is minimized. No one rushes to windows unnecessarily, and no one wastes fire. By this point in the siege, both sides have learned that impatience is punished. Inside the McSween house, stillness is survival. Civilians remain in the interior rooms. The children are kept away from exposed walls. Movement inside the structure is controlled and purposeful. The fighters understand that one stray round through adobe can undo everything. Confidence inside the house remains high. The walls have held through multiple days of rifle fire. No assault has breached them. The street remains uncrossed. The enemy remains outside. From this vantage point, endurance feels like advantage. The men inside believe they can outlast Peppin's posse. They believe time favors the fortified. Billy shares this belief, but not as a strategist, as a participant. He is 19 years old, armed, inside a structure that has not yet failed. The evidence around him suggests that patience is working. That perception is critical because sieges distort perspective. Inside a fortified space, survival itself begins to feel like progress. If no one has forced you out, you must be holding the upper hand. If the enemy has not crossed the street, you must be winning. Nothing on day 4 inside the McSween house yet contradicts that conclusion. The house stands, the positions hold, the fighters remain, the structure of command has not collapsed. From within those walls, the siege appears sustainable. That assessment will not survive the day, but at this moment, before noon, firing resumes in earnest. Before casualties alter the emotional calculus, Billy the Kid is not a myth. He's not a fugitive icon, not yet the figure that history will extract from this fight. He is a young regulator inside a house that still believes endurance equals control. And that belief is shared by every armed man standing beside him. Shortly after noon on day 4, the quiet ends. There is no escalation, no signal, no coordinated surge. The rifles simply begin again. Positions that had gone silent reacquire targets. Windows become apertures. Firing angles are reestablished from memory. By this stage of the siege, both sides understand exactly where exposure exists and where it does not. The McSween house absorbs repeated fire from across the street. Impacts strike adobe. Dust falls from interior walls. The sound is familiar now. Sharp report, impact, settling debris. From the Murphy-Dolan side, the Wortley Hotel, the house, the Torion, return fire answers methodically. No one attempts a rush. No one crosses open ground. This is not an assault. It is maintenance. The siege operates on discipline. Exposure is punished immediately. Impatience is corrected by rifle fire. Every movement is calculated against known lines of sight. Inside the McSween house, the regulators respond in kind. They rotate shooters through established positions. Ammunition is conserved. No unnecessary shots are taken. Targets are engaged when visible, but ignored when not. This is no longer a fight of aggression. It is a contest of attrition. At some point during this renewed exchange, George Bowers is struck. The shot enters the house. It does not come during a reckless exposure. It does not follow a charge. It is part of the routine exchange that has defined the last several days. Bowers is wounded. The injury is serious enough to register, but it's not catastrophic. He's not killed. He is not removed from the structure permanently. He remains alive and conscious. Inside the house, the response is procedural. The wound is assessed. He is moved out of immediate exposure. The firing positions remain manned. The fight does not pause. This is critical. A casualty inside a fortified structure can fracture morale if it signals vulnerability. Bowers' wound does not produce that reaction. The house remains intact. No breach follows. No forced withdrawal occurs. From the perspective of the men inside, the logic remains consistent. They are still standing. No one has stormed the building. No one has forced surrender. No position has been abandoned. The firing continues through the afternoon in this measured pattern. Impact, reply, stillness, reacquisition. The geometry holds, and inside the McSween house, confidence hardens rather than weakens. Wounded men have been managed. The structure has not failed. The enemy has not advanced. If the siege were unsustainable, it would have broken by now. This is the conclusion being drawn inside those walls. It is a conclusion based on visible evidence, and it's incomplete. By mid-afternoon on day 4, the siege has already claimed lives in Lincoln County, but not here, not inside this house. The Lincoln County War did not begin with this siege. Months earlier, John Tunstall had been killed. Men had ridden in retaliation. Ambushes had followed. Arrests, escapes, shootings in open country. The Regulators had already buried comrades and enemies alike. They were not unacquainted with death. But until this moment, the McSween house had functioned as more than a defensive position. It had functioned as a boundary. Violence had crossed the street repeatedly. It had shattered windows. It had scarred adobe. It had wounded men. It had not yet settled permanently inside. Sometime after the noon exchange resumes, a single round enters the McSween house and finds Tom Collins. There is no shouted warning, no dramatic surge of fire marking the moment, just the crack of a rifle from across the street, the impact of a bullet that had already crossed that distance hundreds of times before. But this time, it does not miss. Collins is struck and killed. The records describe the shot as stray, not aimed with precision, not part of a charge. It completes its trajectory and it stops inside the structure, and he dies instantly. Tom Collins becomes the first Regulator killed inside the McSween house during the siege. It is not the first death of the war. It is not even the first Regulator death in the broader conflict. But it is the first body that must be managed inside the walls that these men have trusted. The reaction is immediate and controlled. There is no collapse of position, no shouting that alters the defensive rhythm, no abandonment of firing angles. The men nearest to him lift him. Billy the Kid is among them. Not distinguished, not central, just simply present. They carry Collins downstairs into the cellar. The cellar becomes what cellars become in sieges, storage for what cannot yet be resolved. The act is not cold, it is disciplined. These are not men encountering death for the first time. By July of 1878, they have seen friends fall in open country. They have ridden away from bodies that could not immediately be buried. They understand that grief must wait until survival is secured. They have learned to mourn on schedule, not in the moment. Collins is placed where he will not interfere with the living. The cellar door closes. Upstairs, the rifles continue. This is not indifference, it's compartmentalization. Inside the McSween house, the calculus is brutal and simple. The structure must hold. If positions collapse because men abandon them to grieve, Collins' death multiplies. So they return to their stations, and here the psychology turns. From inside, Collins' death does not signal collapse. The house remains intact. No assault follows. No breach occurs. The enemy has not crossed the street yet again. These walls will stand. To battle-hardened men, this matters. They have learned that in prolonged fighting, the first death inside a structure often precedes a rush, a push from the opposing side sensing weakness. That rush does not come. The afternoon firing continues in the same measured rhythm. And from within the McSween house, the conclusion begins to take shape. If even death cannot force retreat, the position must still be sound. That belief is reinforced by repetition. They have endured days of rifle fire. They have endured a wounded man in Bowers. Now they endure a dead one, and still the structure holds. Billy the Kid remains inside that structure, rifle in hand, part of the defensive rotation. He does not deliver speeches. He does not seize command. He does what the others do. He absorbs the loss. He continues the work. This is where later legend diverges from the record. Popular memory prefers Billy in motion, breaking sieges, riding through the flames, commanding men with reckless charisma. If you've seen Young Guns, this is the stretch where the film abandons restraint. The 5-day siege becomes a single cinematic eruption. Billy the Kid kills Charlie Crawford in the street with a shot between the eyes. William Murphy appears in town directing the entire fight before he dies in the street. The Regulators are reduced to a handful of men in one house. None of that happens. As we know, Charlie Crawford had been shot days earlier from extreme distance and dies later under Army care. Murphy's not even in town. The Regulators occupy multiple positions, and Billy is not conducting a one-man war. The film does many things well. This is not one of them. Instead, day 4 presents something else. Billy as a participant in disciplined defense. Billy helping carry fallen comrade into a cellar because the firing lanes cannot be abandoned. Billy continuing to fight not because he's fearless, but because stopping would change nothing. From the outside, Colin's death marks escalation, but from the inside, it marks permanence. The siege now contains a body that will have to be buried when this is all over. And that fact, though not yet understood by the men upstairs, begins to alter calculations beyond the walls. But inside the McSween house, the interpretation remains steady. They are still standing. And in a siege, measured by endurance, still standing feels like victory. By mid-afternoon on day 4, the siege has settled into a rhythm. Shots trade across the street, positions hold. The McSween house remains intact. The Murphy Dolan side remains entrenched. From inside Lincoln, it looks sustainable. From the outside, it looks unstable. The first shift does not arrive as fact, it arrives as rumor. Word begins to move through Sheriff Peppin's men, quietly at first, then with sharper edges. John Chisum, they hear, is riding towards Lincoln, not alone and not unarmed. He is bringing men, 30, maybe 35 cowboys, more than enough to alter a balance that has so far held in a stalemate. And then comes the detail that transforms anxiety into urgency: a howitzer, a cannon. Whether this detail is accurate is almost irrelevant. No verified sighting confirms it. No artillery has been seen moving towards Lincoln, but the rumor is specific enough to feel credible. And that specificity is what gives fear structure. The siege has been built on known geometry: rifles across the street, adobe against lead, movement punished, patience rewarded. Artillery changes geometry. A cannon does not respect firing lanes. It does not negotiate walls. It does not care who occupies which window. If Chisum were to arrive with such a weapon, the siege would not continue. It would end. And it would end on John Chisum's terms. For Peppin's men and for Jimmy Dolan, that possibility is intolerable. The stalemate, while costly, has been manageable. Positions are known, strengths are understood. The Regulators remain contained inside structures, but an external force, especially one aligned with Chisum, would shift the entire contest. The balance has survived on predictability. A cannon introduces unpredictability, and that is enough. Jimmy Dolan does not wait for confirmation. He does not dispatch scouts to verify Chisum's movement. He understands the strategic implication immediately. If authority does not intervene now, it may be overtaken. The siege cannot be allowed to escalate beyond local control, and so Dolan makes his decision. He mounts up. With him ride men whose names carry weight: John Kinney, George Roxy Rose, Sam Perry, and others. They do not leave in formation. They do not depart in fanfare. They simply ride out of Lincoln and head towards Fort Stanton. The siege continues behind them. Shots still trade across the street. The McSween house remains manned. Billy the Kid and the Regulators do not know that Dolan has left. From inside their position, nothing has changed. But something has. The conflict is no longer confined to those holding rifles inside town. It has moved into the realm of authority. The ride to Fort Stanton is not long, but it is decisive. Dolan does not go there to observe. He goes to secure intervention. There is no public gathering upon arrival, no speech from the parade ground. He requests and receives a private audience with Colonel Nathan Dudley. No transcript survives of what is said behind those doors, but the substance is clear. Dolan asks for military assistance, directly. Not for mediation, not for escort, for intervention. He presents the siege not as a local dispute, but as a destabilizing event requiring federal presence. By this point, Dudley has already witnessed the spillover. Civilians have arrived seeking protection. Homes have been seized. The town has partially emptied. A man has been killed inside a residence. Now there are rumors of private artillery entering the equation. The siege is expanding beyond what restraint can plausibly contain. Dolan does not need to exaggerate. He only needs to position himself at the moment restraint becomes risk. The meeting is brief. No troops march that afternoon. No declaration is made. But when Dolan and his companions ride back towards Lincoln, they carry something new: expectation. The question is no longer whether the army will move. It is how it will justify doing so. Inside Lincoln, the afternoon firing continues. Billy remains inside the McSween house. Collins remains in the cellar. The walls remain standing. From their vantage point, the siege still belongs to those enduring it. But outside Lincoln, the axis is shifted. The contest is no longer simply Regulators versus Murphy Dolan. It has become a question of federal authority deciding how much instability it is willing to tolerate. The rumor about Chisum may never materialize. The cannon may never appear, but it has already accomplished what it needed to. It has forced urgency into a space that had been governed by patience. And patience, by the end of day 4, is running out. By nightfall on day 4, the decision has already begun to form. It does not happen in Lincoln, it happens in Fort Stanton. Colonel Nathan Dudley calls his officers together in the evening. There is no emergency tone to the gathering, no alarm is sounded, no riders are dispatched in haste. The absence of urgency is deliberate. This is not reaction. It is assessment completed. For 4 days, Dudley has maintained non-intervention. He has watched the siege develop from a distance of only a few miles. He has seen civilians arrive seeking protection. He has observed the town partially empty itself. He has received reports of injuries and at least one confirmed death inside a residence. He has allowed the conflict to remain local. That position is no longer sustainable. Inside the officers' meeting, Dudley states plainly that the garrison will march into Lincoln in the morning, Friday, July 19th. The phrasing matters. He does not announce that the army will take sides. He does not declare that the Regulators will be suppressed. He does not state that the sheriff will be reinforced. He frames the action narrowly. The purpose of the march, he explains, is the preservation of life, specifically the protection of women and children still within the town. The wording is careful. Federal troops cannot simply function as a posse. The legal boundary is real, and Dudley understands this, so the justification is humanitarian. The army will not enter the fight. It will enter to prevent further loss of civilian life. That is the official rationale. Every officer in the room understands the implication. Presence, when backed by force, alters outcomes whether or not a shot is fired. The meeting concludes without spectacle. There is no public proclamation, but almost immediately, Dudley issues a second instruction, the howitzer. Fort Stanton possesses a small field piece, long neglected, not part of routine readiness. It has been sitting on the parade ground more as a symbol than an instrument. Dudley orders it repaired, not inspected, not evaluated, repaired. The post blacksmith, Mr. Nelson, is directed to work through the night to make the cannon serviceable by morning. This is not contingency planning, it is commitment. The howitzer's mere presence in Lincoln will transform the siege. Adobe walls that have endured rifle fire for days will not withstand artillery. The psychological effect alone would be decisive. Whether the cannon will fire is secondary. It must be ready. Under lantern light, iron is heated and hammered. Repairs are made, not in secrecy, but without announcement. There is no crowd gathering, no audience to witness the decision taking physical shape, but it is taking shape. The careful language of humanitarian intervention is being matched by the blunt reality of artillery preparation. By ordering the howitzer be made ready, Dudley removes the last ambiguity. The army will not simply observe, it will arrive with weight. Back in Lincoln, darkness settles quietly. The firing is stopped for the night. No one attempts movement, no raids are launched. Windows remain boarded. Watches are set. The McSween house holds its positions. Billy the Kid remains inside. The men there believe the siege has entered another survivable night. They do not know that, several miles away, iron is being worked so that morning will not resemble today. By the time day 4 ends, The outcome has already shifted beyond the control of the men trading rifle fire across Lincoln's main street. The decision has been reached. It has simply not yet been delivered. As the sun slowly drops behind the hills on day 4, Lincoln grows quiet. Not peaceful, not safe, just still. The rifle fire that has defined the town for days thins, then stops entirely. No one attempts a night maneuver. No one tests the darkness the way they did the previous evening. No movement crosses the street. No figures slip between the buildings. Both sides hold. Windows remain boarded. Doors remain barred. Men take their watches. The McSween house settles into the rhythm of a fortified structure at night. Rifles are cleaned. Ammunition is counted. Positions are quietly reassigned for the morning. In the cellar, Tom Collins lies where he was placed earlier that afternoon. Upstairs, no one speaks of him at length. There will be time for burial later, if they survive. Billy the Kid remains inside with the others. No breakout is planned, no last stand is anticipated. From within those walls, the siege still feels manageable. The line has not been breached. The enemy has not crossed the street. The structure still stands. To the men inside Lincoln, this silence suggests continuity. Tomorrow will look a lot like today. The siege has found its equilibrium. Across town, the Murphy-Dolan positions also hold steady. No rush is attempted, no celebratory firing marks the evening. They too settle in, believing morning will resume the same geometry that has governed the fight so far. This is the first silence, a silence born of exhaustion and routine, a silence interpreted as stability, but several miles away, another silence takes shape. Fort Stanton does not sound an alarm. No bugle announces mobilization. From a distance, the post appears ordinary. Lanterns in windows, guards at standard posts, routine movement fading with the light. Inside, the officers already know. The march is set for morning. Orders have been given quietly. Assignments clarified, justifications framed. Down near the parade ground, iron cools. The howitzer has been worked through the night. Repairs completed, wheels checked, mechanism restored to serviceable condition. It sits ready. There is no debate about whether it will accompany the column. It will. The presence of artillery is no longer theoretical. The second silence is not exhaustion. It is preparation. In Lincoln, men lie down believing that they have survived another day of attrition. At Fort Stanton, men prepare to ensure that attrition ends. The distance between the two places is short, but the understanding between them is vast. Inside Lincoln, stillness feels like control. Inside Fort Stanton, stillness is the moment before movement. Day 4 ends without a shot fired, but the balance has already shifted. One side waits for morning, the other intends to define it. By the end of day 4, the courtroom fills again, not with witnesses, not with testimony, with understanding. The record is no longer disputed. Civilians have fled, homes have been seized, men have been wounded. One has been killed inside a residence that was never meant to be a battlefield. The facts are complete. What remains unresolved is responsibility. Day 4 is the last day where that responsibility can still pretend to be undecided. It is the final moment where restraint can still be decided as policy instead of delay, where endurance can still be mistaken for advantage. Inside Lincoln, the Regulators end the night confident. The walls still stand, the street has not been crossed, no forced surrender has occurred. From inside the McSween house, survival looks like proof. Billy the Kid is there with them, not leading a charge and not issuing commands, and he's not shaping history, he's just present. A 19-year-old holding a rifle, standing watch, helping carry a fallen comrade below the ground, believing, like the others, that if they can simply hold out long enough, the siege will break in their favor. That belief is sincere. It is also about to collide with authority, because beyond the walls of Lincoln, beyond the boarded windows and exhausted watch rotations, the decision has already moved into chambers. The arguments have been weighed. The limit of waiting has been reached. and the verdict has been prepared. No announcement has been made, no troops have yet stepped into the street, but orders have been issued. Iron is being repaired. Mourning has been scheduled. This is how outcomes are often decided, not in the noise, but in the quiet beforehand. Day 4 will be the last day Billy the Kid exists inside this siege as simply another rifle in a fortified house. By the time Day 5 concludes, he will no longer be just that. The courtroom does not adjourn in chaos. It adjourns in inevitability. The verdict will not be debated. It will arrive. And when it does, it will not ask who endured. It will decide who moves. Court is adjourned. The sentence will be delivered in the morning. If you want to take action before the listening, the Dark Dialogue Collective is the way that you do it. This is not a donation tier. It's boots on the ground work, physical searches, direct victim and family support, and real-world action where it's needed most. You can also get involved through our Adopt a Victim program. You can find information on both at www.darkdialogue.com. This program focuses exclusively on unsolved cases, adopting victims to research their case, work to identify unnamed victims, identify perpetrators where possible, or help push stalled investigations forward. All of the victim blog posts are also available at our website, darkdialogue.com, where we preserve stories, document cases, and keep names from being forgotten. If you want to support the network financially, you can do so through our Patreon or for one-time contributions at coffee.com. For long-form writing, research notes, and extended analysis, you can follow us on our Substack at darkdialoguecrime.substack.com. For questions, case tips, or professional inquiries, you can reach us directly at info@darkdialogue.com. Across the network, you'll find our main show, Rocky Mountain Reckoning, Distilled, Unraveled Truths, and of course, Shadow Chat Sessions. And if you're listening on a podcast platform or watching on YouTube, please make sure to like, share, review, subscribe, and ring that bell so that you don't miss future episodes. Those actions matter more than most people realize, and we appreciate them so much. Keep listening, keep digging, keep wondering, and above all, make the guilty face the gallows.